Hi everyone. It is June the 7th, and I'm finally coming to you with the information on Stalingrad that I said I had been looking into. However, interestingly, it's going to become less of a discussion, I think, on Stalingrad itself and more about a specific Swiss painter, that by the name of Arnold Bocklin. Um, this whole thing got started for me thanks to a website that had been sent to me quite a long time ago. It's called Tartaria.info, and I'll put the link below in the description. It's a Russian website, and I always have high respect for Russian alternative historical researchers. They are excellent. The majority of the site is in Russian. Some of the site is in English. The specific article I'm going to be referring to on Stalingrad is only in Russian. So that link is below, and you'll have to go and translate it into whatever language is your language, unless you speak Russian. It's a second part of a two-part article on Stalingrad, and I have to be honest with you, I really still don't even understand the articles very well, and I don't think it's because I'm not figuring out. I just don't think it's really well explained or laid out, you might say. And I don't think it's the translation. I think if someone here speaks Russian and you go and read the article in Russian, you're going to find it very confusing. It's a lot of maps with uh, lines and dots and not a lot of real explanation of what's being said. But it got movement into thinking, and the thinking is that um, the Battle of Stalingrad itself has been one of those events of the Second World War that I never really understood. I didn't look into it deeply enough, but this whole idea that after the um, German invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, and when they hadn't been able to take Moscow, for these various reasons that it's claimed this couldn't happen. Um, that the German army regrouped, came up with new plans and new ideas, and decided to attack further south towards the Caucasus oil fields with the idea combination of stopping the Soviet oil supply and taking over the city that's been named after its leader. That's the standard historical explanation as for why the city was attacked. But again, that didn't really make a lot of sense because that's not normal military strategy. You don't you wouldn't attack a city. In fact, you might, if anything, you might attack Leningrad. More importantly, um, if you're looking to take over a city with a communist leader's name, it would be a much more important blocking point for um, shipping in and out of the Black Sea, of sort of containing that entire area, of being able to supply the Finns who are your allies. So the whole push to Stalingrad never made much sense. And of course it turned into about the equivalent of World War One on a on just a city scale rather than in a trench scale, right? It was a slaughter. And it didn't make sense. Why was it so important? Why was it so important for the Germans, and why was it so important for the Russians? Now the article kind of indicates in its own way that what was important about Stalingrad had nothing to do with any of the things that are suggested by historians, but what was important about the city was that um, it has some sort of ancient connections to the ancient wisdom of Greece, Rome, Tartaria, that this would have been some sort of sacred city. And that's now, of course, what you have there now, right? What the Stalingrad is there now is was it Volgograd now? Volgograd. There's almost nothing left of the city, right? The original city was blown to bits. So just about everything that's on top now is brand new. And there's only a few photographs and images of pre-World War II Stalingrad. And there's not much that I could pick up that's, specific to it being a city that reminds you of Budapest or, Florence or Paris or any of the world's fairs. But what's being alluded to is that there is something underneath the city of Stalingrad, that the city of Stalingrad was built on top of, again, I'm reading between the lines, and if somebody here's better in Russian than I am and can read the original Russian without the translation, maybe you'll figure out more than I could figure out reading the translated versions of the articles. But it seems like he's claiming or she, whoever wrote the article, there's an underground system, there was an underground city almost underneath Stalingrad, as of course most major cities have an underground. But this, again, the feeling was that the upper Stalingrad was built on a city below it. Similar to how Egyptian temples were built on a temple below it, that if you actually went down, like a Luxor temple, it's one of the reasons they had to shut a whole bunch of the reconstruction down, is because they found the underground temple. They found the original temple Luxor was built on, and you don't want anyone asking questions about that, so they covered that up pretty quickly. And the feeling is that Hitler wanted this city because of what was underneath Stalingrad. It wasn't Stalingrad specifically that he wanted. He wanted what was underneath Stalingrad. And hence the reason to put so much material, so much input, so much so that, I mean, really, in one sense, the war was almost lost after losing this battle. You can say that if the story of World War II is mostly true, which of course we know it isn't, but let's pretend that it is, then this would have been, as Midway was the real loss point for the Japanese, this was the real loss point for the Germans. It was very hard for them to come back from this defeat. But the article then goes on. Okay, so I've been reading this article, I'm like, well, and it actually gave me headaches. It was so hard to try to figure out. And how am I going to present this stuff? Because I don't really have anything to say. And then at the bottom of this second part of the article, the author begins to get into the painter Arnold Bocklin, this guy, who was a Swiss painter in the late 19th century. A symbolist painter, and specifically a painter who was very focused on what you might call the mythological figures of ancient Greece and ancient Rome, and presenting mythology in his paintings. He was one of Hitler's most favorite painters, and the article again in this Tartaria.info seems to indicate that Arnold Bocklin may have been painting things that related to this area of southern Russia, that what he's painting is not so much ancient Rome or ancient Greece as it was being presented. He's presenting this part of the world, that there are things in his paintings that are potentially real around this area of Stalingrad, and that Hitler was going to take the city and the area in order to take over these sacred sites. Okay, that's a theory. But I wanted to look into this Arnold Bocklin for you because the paintings are quite unique. I can't say like they're stunning like Botticelli or Da Vinci or something from the standpoint of their technical skill, but the symbolism and the wisdom that's in them. And the first one that got me was this. It was a self-portrait he did in 1875, which is him with death. And right away, this is somebody who knows something. I mean, this is Carlos Castaneda almost as perfectly as you can present it. I mean, Castaneda always talked about death being a finger's touch away over your left shoulder. If you just turn to look at it, I mean, that right there is like that element of a Carlos Castaneda novel brought to life. And I'm pretty sure this painter knew what he was talking about from the standpoint of dealing with death. So I won't doubt it's hard to find real information, specifics on Bocklin. And while he did have many children who died early in his life, he had 14 children, like yikes. 3 or 4 or something died early in his life. But I think he somehow got to know death personally. And I wouldn't be surprised if this, given what's in his paintings, there's a tremendous awakening. Now he paints a lot of life and he paints a lot of death in his paintings. And I just want to show you some of these paintings that really got my attention. And it was very interesting to sort of indicate, could this be a part of what's going on in around Stalingrad? And this one is called Sacred Grove. And he did, I think, 3 versions of this painting, all in the 1880s. So again, Bocklin is painting right at the time, or the late parts of a Bocklin's painting, and specifically he gets more symbolic in the 1880s and the 1890s after he'd spent time in Rome and Florence. He lived in both places, and after he lived in Florence, his paintings got much more symbolic, much more Renaissance inspired. And this is right at the time that Saunière is taking over Rennes Le Chateau, and there's even going to be a painting that will remind us of Rennes Le Chateau that we're going to get to. But here's Sacred Grove. And Sacred Grove is a spectacular painting. It really, really is. This is what it's bringing into you is spectacular. Not just the sort of druid-like individuals, but this altar that's sitting in this grove of trees, right? That the grove itself is sacred. That the nature here is sacred, but they've built this place in the background. If you look kind of in the distance, it's really hard to see. The distance to your right, there's the temple. So there's an outer temple, almost like here's the temple, here's what the regular world sees, and this sacred grove is more like the inner sanctuary of it, or where the real power, the real wisdom, or the real knowledge is, and that's sort of only for the, in this case, only the initiated. I don't want to say it that way because it makes it sound like it's exclusionary, and I don't think that's what he's referring to here. Again, everything is symbolism. So I think this is of course referring. This sacred grove is the inner part of the self. This is the outer temple is sort of what's seen by the external world, and this is the internal world, and this is the world you can get to through the process of going within. So that one got me then started on the next run. But here comes some others that I just want to point out, just put up and just showed you really, really briefly. So he did one. He's done a number on like the Island of Life, like this. This is like the Island of Life. And then here's the Isle. This is one he's most known for. He did a number of these called the Isle of the Dead. And it's this very idealistic, very Egyptian feeling painting. And again, there's this question is this a real place? And is this a place in Italy? Is this a place in France? Is this a place in Switzerland, Germany rather, where he grew up and lived part of his life? Or is it this area of around Stalingrad? Or and again, I'm having trouble understanding exactly why the author is linking Bocklin so carefully to the story of Stalingrad. And again, I'm going to leave that for you to research in the article and maybe share with us in the comments if you can figure it out. And again, it might just, who knows, maybe it translates better into Swedish or German or French or Italian or Japanese, or I don't know. Somebody whose English isn't their first language might be the one to crack what this Stalingrad article is really presenting with Bocklin. But there's no question that his paintings are spectacular. Here, Isle of the Dead. I mean, this is again, it's evoking this. He's kind of presenting one of the things. He got very sorry for jumping around a lot on this, but he got very attacked. This Bocklin guy was not very well liked later on in history. While many saw him as a, like a poet of nature. I'm just reading an article on poet of nature, an inventor, a strong sensuality transformed into his images. Many accused him of being a reactionary force, impeding progress in the arts. So he's actually attacked by other artists for impeding progress in the arts. That's a pretty heavy-duty statement to be labeled against a painter. And in 1947, someone wrote, Bocklin's work is one of the most consummate expressions of all that is now disliked about the latter half of the 19th century. Because this was a time, it's claimed, of social upheaval, aggressive shift in nationalism. And we're talking about the entire overthrow. I mean, when Bocklin is painting, he's painting in this period of the reset. He's painting in the time of the World's Fairs, right? He's painting at the time that the World's Fairs are going at that the old world is being swept away and the new world is being thrown onto everybody. And here's Bocklin in some way painting peaceful painting these landscapes which they're claiming is the ideal of ancient mythology. But is he not just painting mythology? Is he not painting, again, if you don't think he's painting ancient Greece or ancient Rome, he's painting the world that was just lost. If you get this, Bocklin is painting the world that has just been destroyed. While everyone else is focused on what's coming ahead, somehow Bocklin still remembers or knows or had access to the knowledge of what had just been taken over. He knew where these buildings were. He knew where these sites were. Maybe, obviously, there's still, if this period had been going on for a short period, sorry for the darkness, by the way. The light just doesn't come into my apartment very well. The windows aren't big enough. But Bocklin might be painting the world that's just left, that he either remembered or knows where the buildings are, knows the stories, has been taught by groups that have survived from the old world and were still holding the ancient teachings alive, whatever. To me, Bocklin is painting what was just gone. That's why Bocklin's paintings are so important, and that's why the people, and particularly he's getting attacked in 1947, right? We talked about the year 1947, the year of the things happening in Antarctica, the Roswell incident, the creation of the CIA and the Secret Service in the United States, that this is a year where you're kind of post-World War II locking in this new world we've been under, that's sort of the 1880s, 1890s, whatever, 1870s brought in one world, and now this is locking in the world and cementing it even more in place. And that's when Bocklin, the very time Bocklin's getting more and more attacked, is this period of get rid of the old way of thinking. So to me, these kind of things tell me if the critics really want to attack this guy so strongly and at that particular time period, then there's something really important in his paintings. Let's look at a couple more. Let's look at the one that links us to Rennes Le Chateau, and that's this one called The Tomb of Hercules. Now, if you've looked at the Poussin paintings closely enough, you can almost see the similarity in some ways that you're looking at something similar. And it's very similar to Sacred Grove as well, because you've got this tomb, this circular tomb, and the tree is within. So it's like there's the Sacred Grove, there's the entrance to the inner world. But if you're seeing this is also similar to the painting of Poussin, which all we know is Tomb et in Arcadia Ego, here we have Bocklin naming it. Bocklin is naming it as the Tomb of Hercules. So Tomb of Hercules, if you step back and say the Tomb of Hercules, which we talked about in the Holy Grail video, that comes up several times in the story of Rennes Le Chateau, and of course you might say the Tomb of Hercules and the Tomb of Jesus and the Tomb of Christian Rosenkreuz, that they're all the same thing. It's the same story, it's the same myth, it's the same presentation. And Bocklin's painting it again. He's just naming it. I wouldn't be surprised if you looked closely enough and Et in Arcadia Ego would come here. So those who have been following the Rennes Le Chateau series look at this painting very, very carefully. There's still 4 in here. There isn't one that's a shepherdess specifically, but you do see the one holding the spear near the bottom of it has very long hair, whitish, almost blondish maybe hair, and that could be the female of the group, as there was one female in the Poussin painting. Notice that the colors that are being displayed on the people on the left side are blue, yellow, and red, which are three of the four Hermetic colors. White being usually the second stage. Yellow is considered the third stage in the four-step process. Also notice that I love this painting actually because of the quality of the shine of the way the marble shines. I mean, this looks almost like a photograph more than a painting. And again, you have to wonder, did he actually have, I mean, he must have had I'm almost positive he had a real place to work with, that to make something this perfect with this kind of look, he's modeling this on something, and you have to wonder, did he, again, the article on Tartaria.info is questioning if people like Bocklin and other painters of his time were using photographs to do all their artwork from. And so if they're using photographs, what were they photographing? Okay, a couple of other images just to bring up. There's the one of Hercules. We've got this one here called The Awakening of Spring, which, to anyone who knows the Birth of Venus by Botticelli that's behind me on the couch, this is very similar, even though it has a name similar to what would be Primavera, and a little bit of a look to Primavera by Botticelli. This also reminds me so much of Birth of Venus on so many levels, and I'm going to dig through the two of them. It's almost like he's understanding something in Birth of Venus that he's bringing out in this painting from his time in Florence. You've got Pan playing the flute, and I'm going to really look into the detail he's trying to bring out. But again, the idea of the trees, the sacred grove, the inner world of the inner part of the mind. He did one called The Plague. I'm not going to say too much about it, but this one, of course, fits into our world today, and that's a very unique painting. He did that in the 1880s or something, I think. And then we'll end with this one. This was his last painting. And I'm giving the links below to the general site of him and the one that lists all of his paintings. So you can go and look at the paintings yourself. This one, I think, is called Furious Roland. I can't remember, but this is the last painting that he did before he died, and there's no question that is an important piece of information that he is, I think, this showing what he lived through, or the period that created what he was living through. That this is not just symbolic art. That this is kind of like he's leaving a historical document. Okay, so where does that take us to go back to Stalingrad? So, assuming that Stalingrad is somehow linked to this period of ancient knowledge, that Stalingrad is an ancient, we'll call it Greek or Roman or whatever you want to call it, right? That time period, that really what Hitler is after, or what the German army is after, is the ancient power source, the ancient temple, or the ancient wisdom or something of this area. Not now. I know there's still something called a mortuary in Stalingrad. I'm just looking it up now. Mortuary. And that building, I think that's still an original building, as I recall. It was, no, that's the Eternal Flame. That's not what I'm looking for. This statue. No, there's something called the memorial. Like a giant Greek or Roman building somewhere in Stalingrad and Volgograd. And yeah, I would, here it is. there's a picture of it on the site, but I'm looking at it in Russian, of course. I'm not looking at the English translation, so I can't get the name of it. But it's in the article, further down in the article, and you can go and check it out yourself. But there's also this building there that is very unique to the story. So I don't know what I've really said about Stalingrad in this video per se, other than to give you a new avenue of trying to look at, again, the whole story of the oil fields and the I want to take over the name because it's the name of the city. I don't really think that makes sense, and certainly not the way that the Germans had their successes to that point, the way they had run their battles to that point, and their campaigns. That wouldn't have made any sense to them. Taking Leningrad, taking St. Petersburg would have been seemingly a much more important avenue, not just, I think, from the standpoint strategically, from the standpoint of the name, to take over the Hermitage in St. Petersburg and take over all of the artwork and the ancient power sources and statues and whatnot. That should have been higher on. If Hitler has all of this focus on the occult and on, the Grail and the Spear of Destiny and whatever, I guarantee you there's stuff at the Hermitage that he would want. He would want to make sure he gets what's at the Hermitage out and into Germany. So why take all of your forces and throw it at Stalingrad to stop some oil? No. He wants the city for something else. That something else must be some sort of, I'm going to assume, ancient city, ancient temple complex, ancient knowledge, ancient artifacts, something that existed in that city. And again, this article suggests that Arnold Bocklin's artwork is giving an indication into what that is. And so I'm going to leave it there as a suggestion of where now you can take the research yourself. And I've tried to go, I've started some Google searching now after this to try to see, okay, where can I take the next lead? Where can I go on Stalingrad itself with this idea, Stalingrad, occult, Stalingrad, ancient city, Stalingrad, ancient Rome, Stalingrad, ancient Greece, whatever. And just nothing comes up. There's nothing written about any of these kind of links. So if you find something, or if you get some information, or if you have a direction that this conversation can go, put it in the comments, because the next step from here is really hard to find. Like I say, this Tartaria.info, right? I did very little of the information research on this. This is the person who presented the basic principle. I'm just now digging through that basic principle through my own eyes. What the next step is here, because something feels like dig into the Battle of Stalingrad more for some reason. It's going to reveal something really, really interesting, but I don't know what the next step is. If you can figure out what the next step is, let us all know, and some of us can take it together. Okay, that's what I've come up with to this point. If something new comes up, thanks to your suggestions and your own research and whatnot, we'll take it from there. Look into the paintings of Bocklin. They are really, really interesting, symbolic, and again, right at the time period of the World's Fairs, Rennes Le Chateau, Béranger-Saunière. I mean, everything. His paintings are that time frame, and I'm really going to actually now look into what's known as symbolistic art. What he is, right? He was known as a symbolistic art painter, and I want to look way more into this period of symbolism, which was mostly in France and Russia and Belgium, I think, which focused on poetry and metaphor and language in the paintings, coming right out of coming out of the work of Edgar Allan Poe and whatnot, and turning these things into painting. So I want to look more into this time period as to oh wow, what a beautiful, I'm just looking through it now, beautiful painting by obviously a Russian painter, Victor, I'm going to put it up now, Vasnetsov, called Night at the Crossroads, 1878. This is just a spectacular painting. Now, of course, there shouldn't be a night in 1878. Of course, he's putting in this symbolistic painting, but look at the staggering beauty of the gravestone and the not just the dead, not just the skull, of course, representing the death of the self. The same thing with the bird. You've got the dead animal, which it's assuming is a horse. Is the knight and the horse looking at itself in the future? Like, is it night at the crossroads? Is the crossroads here? He's seeing the death of himself. He's seeing into the future the death of himself. Is it the death of someone that he knows? This is a spectacular painting right here of knowledge. So I'm seeing that this period known as symbolism is quite spectacular. This other one called Young Girls at the Edge of the Sea, which is at the Museum of Paris, or these are spectacular and very very Renaissance feeling. This one here, it seemed very simple, called Saint Cecilia. Again, very Renaissance-like to me, very and tremendous knowledge. I mean, here, is she dead? Is she sleeping? Is she dreaming? Is she leaving reality? I mean, these are outstanding. So I highly recommend you go. I'm going to go through and look a bit more at this period that I've never looked at of symbolist painters, and maybe something will come from that. So anyway, I'll stop there. Thanks for joining again for this video. We're going to be working on the masculine feminine one to come up in a week, looking into the other alternatives of where to begin moving my stuff from YouTube to somewhere else. Get that ready. In the meantime, thanks for everything. Thanks for sticking around on this journey. We've got a summer coming up that's probably going to be ours, so let's use the summer wisely, because we're not sure how this future is going to look, so let's use what we have now to the best that we can. See you soon.